Hey, everybody, it's Nevin Gusak, your host of the Populist Patriot, or as Jack Nicholson, to paraphrase Jack Nicholson in the movie The Shining, which came out in 1979, here's Nevin. So, hello, and hope you all are joining me in this next video. I titled more or less Tankie Communist, meaning a hardline ideological Marxist-Leninist, admits that pre-Reagan stakeholder capitalism is antidote to communism. And you're probably thinking, what the heck? Why didn't they tell me this on Fox News or MSNBC? Because they don't want pre-Reagan stakeholder capitalism. They want the continued boot of what Sheldon Wolin, political scientist, termed inverted totalitarianism, where basically we have an oligarchy with democratic trappings. Well, you're not going to hear this in most mainstream media. And as an anti-communist and as an anti-fascist and an anti-Nazi, I like to listen to YouTubers and broadcasters who are communists, who are neo-Nazis and neo-fascists. And in many occasions, particularly with Caleb Maupin in many occasions, they tend to reveal a lot if you know how to listen to what they say. And one such individual that I listen to, and he's a wealth of research and information. He's a very, very bright gentleman, Caleb Maupin. I mean, him and I would probably, if we sat in a room for 3 hours, we probably would really viciously lock horns. And there are other things on the critique of American economic and political structures we would agree with on the surface, but when it comes to solution, as well as who he chooses to affiliate when it comes to government entities like RT and Iran Press TV and whatnot, I mean, I got a problem with that. You know, like if somebody decided to work for, the German broadcasting, the nationalized German broadcasting system during World War II. There were several. During the Third Reich, you had DNB, for example, or Transocean or whatever. Those were state broadcasting networks for Germany. I mean, you know, and you had foreign people, including Americans, that did broadcasting on there, and that doesn't vibe well with me, to put it to you honestly. So, and I listened to Caleb Maupin. He was one of the founders and inspirations for the Center for Political Innovation. It cooperates with, the LaRouchians, the Lyndon LaRouche movement, for example. And Caleb is a wealth of historical knowledge. There's no doubt about it. And there was an article titled on the Center for Political Innovation website, "The Masses Are the Water," dated May 3rd of 2022. And it was very, 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 very interesting point here that he makes. It's an indirect admission that Reaganomics breeds communism, that globalism, financialization breeds communism, that deregulation breeds communism. It's not an effective antidote. That having something called an labor aristocracy, which is a term used by the communists for the privileged workers that have done well because of unionization. So let me read you what Caleb Maupin read here, because it's a revealing point he makes, and it should be a lesson for all anti-communists to absorb, learn, and implement. During the Cold War, it certainly made sense for communists to retreat into the labor movement or hippie counterculture as the comfortable lifestyle of many U.S. workers was the basis for the chauvinism, racism, and anti-communism among a big layer of the country. That's an admission. He's saying Why would the American laborers, the labor aristocracy, the unionized and non-unionized workforces that benefited from the New Deal and progressive legislation to American capitalism and the protectionism and the protections against the labor arbitrage of uncontrolled immigration and things of that nature, not that I'm anti-immigrant per se, that it was, people were like, screw you. Why would I want to be a communist? Why the hell would I want to be a Marxist Leninist? I have a home, a pension, job security, as long as I do a good job, et cetera, et cetera. Caleb Maupin is pointing it out, Center for Political Innovation. Meanwhile, anti-communists are on the, they're busy like reading their pocket constitutions and listening to Mark Lehman and Ben Shapiro and Fox News, the reactionary globalist corporate propaganda mill here. So anyways, Maupin continues, but the Cold War is long over and the labor aristocracy is being eroded by trickle-down economics and globalism. He didn't say that part, I'm adding that part. Living standards are falling. The Center for Political Innovation seeks to reorient socialism away from the New Left's distortion, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And there's an admission right there. Now, in a broadcast on Caleb Maupin's YouTube video, he also mentions this too as well. This is in his live stream number 355, Saturday Night Chat with Caleb. And he provided some interesting history here. He wrote, the new communist movement, which was a Maoist, Stalinist-oriented communist splinter group from the 1970s. The new communist movement, and I transcribed what he said. The new communist movement was mostly white people. Now, you had exceptions, like in Detroit, you had the Dodge Revolutionary Union movement, which became the League of Revolutionary Black Workers, and you had the Communist Workers' Party, which was largely an Asian American organization, but it was mostly white people. And it was wealthier white people. White people who had gone to Harvard, white people who had gone to Yale with wealthier backgrounds. And they would get jobs in the factories and they would try to win their co-workers to communism. And this is during the height of the American labor movement's presence in American private sector. And it didn't go so well because a lot of their co-workers were comfortable and they were trying to figure out how to build a communist movement at a moment when the working class doesn't want to hear it. Why? Because they're not living badly. They don't feel they're being exploited as a class. So Caleb Maupin argued that the communist movements today are, quote, absolutely wrong insofar that they cannot win the workers to communism in America. He said, quote, millions of working class people in the United States have seen their living standards go down. The factories have closed down. Neighborhoods throughout the United States are crumbling. You can see empty foreclosed homes. The water is not being properly purified. The power plants are falling apart. Our power grid in Texas collapsed last year during the winter and had left all kinds of working class families. Working class families are more open to a socialist message than ever before, and that's confirmed by polls, by the way. That labor aristocracy that kind of made the new communist movement impossible has been eroded. Living standards have gone down. They have gone down, and with living standards going down, there is now more potential to win average American workers, white, black, Arab, Asian, Latino, to a revolutionary class struggle message. And wherever you go in the United States, people feel that the government is run by a bunch of rich people who don't care about them, which is true. It is. It is. Trump administration handed over billions in PPP money to all these giant corporations, but yet they've been haggling for a year. The reactionary right-wing globalists in the House and the Senate were all bitching and moaning and haggling about giving a one-time stimulus check to the people. So don't freaking tell me that the government is not run for the benefit of rich people. Maupin is right. Okay, I said it. People feel our freedoms are taken away and our civil liberties are under attack. The police state is out of control. That's what Maupin said in his live stream number 355. Well, to quote Sam Kinison in one of my favorite comedies, Back to School, as he was saying in the history class in college class, is he right? So is Maupin right? Yeah, and that ain't a good thing because we don't want communism to advance in this country. We don't want Marxism, Leninism to become popular because we've seen how it's played out in actually entirely in any country that's practiced it or imposed it or implemented it. But Maupin is correct. And he reveals that the development of a labor aristocracy in the United States, and I would like to see basically labor itself becoming its own bourgeois or petit bourgeois aristocracy, if you will, because that's going to be the most effective antidote. I got to unplug this because we got a thunderstorm coming, so I got to unplug my computer. Safety first, guys. Maupin is right. He's admitting that the pre-Reagan variant of capitalism inoculated the working class of the United States against communism. So, ironically, the best friends of the development of communism are the Joe Manchins, the Kristen Sinemas, the Joe Bidens, the Ted Cruzes, the Ron Johnsons, the Rand Pauls, et cetera, who are all for deregulation, increased proliferation of corporate money in our electoral process, all in the name of this bogus free speech crap. And globalization and outsourcing and the busting of unions and the expansion of right to work and at-will employment conditions and everything else. So more and more young people, and Caleb Maupin, with his resources, he has what appears to be a very dedicated crew. I mean, hell, they're handing out sandwiches and stuff like that in distressed communities. Do we see the local Republicans here in Palm Beach or Broward County doing that? I mean, maybe they are at this point, but I'm not so sure about that. They're too busy fighting the culture wars when the real attack against family values comes from the depredations of corporate capitalism, the higher gas prices, while the oil companies, the big fossil fuel energy companies are raking in massive profits, but yet outpricing the consumers and still exporting oil. Gas prices have always been going up. They've never gone down really to speak of. The rents are out of control in the major metropolitan areas and even outside. The state of Florida, I love the state of Florida, but I got to tell you, this state government, the Republican-dominated government, they ain't doing jack shit to sit down and think of ways of how to improve the housing market and make it Florida a more attractive place for working-class Floridians to live. They'll say, well, you can't interfere because of free market, this Tea Party Reagan rhetoric. But yet, the intelligent and strategically perceptive communists are all picking this up, and they're abiding the time for the final collapse of our late-stage capitalist system. And then you all want to live in a revolutionary tyranny of the left, or the far left, I should say? I don't think so. But if you pursue the free markets, that is gasoline that lights the flames of the expansion of Bolshevism. And this is why we need an alternative to both the scientifically administered totalitarian collectivism, and we need an alternative to this equally inhumane neoliberal market fundamentalism. This is why top American Tankie communist admits that market fundamentalism is fueling and pouring gasoline on the flames of the expansion of the appeal of communism. So, very important segment here. So I wanted to mention that. So I'm going to conclude this live stream. It's 2:16 right now. We got more to go, guys. Alrighty. See you in a few.